From the pandemic to national and world events, this program year has been unprecedented. We have not been in this church building for over a year, and yet church continues. God calls us to do the work of church, and that work was not diminished, though we were not in the same building. Romans chapter 12 says, "For as in one body we have many members, and not all members have the same function, so we, who are many, are one body in Christ, and individually we are members one of another. We have gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, prophecy in proportion to faith, ministry and ministering, the teacher in teaching, the exhorter in exhortation, the giver in generosity, the leader in diligence, the compassionate in cheerfulness." Soon, you will hear updates from finance, facilities, worship, Christian ed, family ministries, the 20s and 30s, youth group, community groups, membership, congregational care, outreach, and EOP, and how they were able to share their gifts to our church and neighbors, and their willingness to explore innovative ways to do so. It has been a privilege to serve FAPC this year. As clerk, I would like to thank two groups in particular. First, to my fellow deacons, officers on the session, the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Deacons, you have stepped up to provide support, from your cheerful faces and helpful spirits in our Zoom meetings to new ways to serve FAPC, such as virtual prayer teams, online angel tree, receiving new members, and more. Thank you. Finally, I want to offer my sincerest gratitude to our pastors and staff who worked tirelessly throughout this year to meet this congregation's needs in ways that I am not sure they expected when they started their careers. So on behalf of the congregation, thank you and God bless you.
The bottom line first. Despite uncertainty that surrounded the church's finances when the pandemic struck New York City in March 2020, Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church finished the year in a strong position, mainly due to the following. We collected 2020 pledge receipts of $3 million. This was our 2020 pledge goal, and you responded by meeting your commitment. Thank you for the faithfulness in this trying time. We secured a $491,000 Paycheck Protection Program loan, which was used entirely for payroll and personnel costs, and enabled us to maintain full staffing levels through June 30. In consultation with our auditors, we have determined that the full amount of this loan should be forgiven. We proactively reduced our original 2020 expense budget by $760,000 in April. By year end, our expenses for 2020 were actually $790,000 lower than our original budget, driven by savings in personnel costs, maintenance, and discretionary spending. These reductions offset the losses that we experienced in terms of rental income and in-person giving to the church. This past year, the church added $738,500 to the endowment, specifically to our capital expenditure fund. These monies came from the sale of 5 donated lots in North Carolina that had been given to the church during the recent capital campaign, Generation to Generation. Finally, being in a healthy financial position enabled us to set aside $100,000 from 2020 toward the work that's currently going on in the sanctuary attic. We're waiting on a final cost for that project and expect those numbers soon. So to sum up again, Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church is on a solid financial footing because our leadership was proactive and you were faithful. The trustees wish to express their gratitude to the staff of this church and to all of you faithful supporters for piloting us so successfully through these choppy waters.
Hello, everyone. During the past year, while we have been away from our sanctuary and church house, much has been happening with our buildings. As you most likely have read in the FAPC weekly emails, we continue to make excellent progress with our live streaming project. It is almost complete with cameras and microphones in place and most of the control room equipment installed. We hope to train those who will be directing and supporting the live streaming broadcasts in May. As you have also read in the weekly emails, while working on the broadcast lighting in the sanctuary, our architect observed there had been some movement of the support system of the sanctuary attic. We brought in structural engineers to assess the situation and are in the process of seeking contracts for the necessary repairs. This is an extensive project that will necessitate moving attic sprinkler pipes and taking the sanctuary's fire protection system offline at times. We'll be bringing in structural steel, possibly by crane, to strengthen existing ceiling supports, and carpenters will be building new supports from wood as well. We did not expect to have to do this work, but it is important for the safety of our congregation and for the long-term preservation of our sanctuary that we do this work now. We are pursuing this project on an aggressive schedule and hope that if we have no hiccups in the process, the sanctuary will be available and usable for worship in early September. During the year, work was completed on the 7th floor terrace of the church house. A paving stone floor and a decorative protective railing were installed to make this an attractive, functional outdoor space. When our facilities reopen, we will be able to dedicate this space in honor of Randy and Cindy Weber. Repairs were made to the sidewalks, and the ongoing work on the attic sprinkler system in the sanctuary and the water piping in the church house continued. Finally, when our facilities were closed last March, we were in the midst of an elevator replacement and refurbishment project. That project has been completed, and when everyone returns to FAPC, they will find two beautiful and well-functioning elevators when they come through the 55th Street entrance. The property committee looks forward to the reopening of our church buildings so everyone can see what's been happening at 5th and 55th.
Hi, everyone. Well, it goes without saying that this has been a year like no other, and this has certainly been true for the music program. When our church had to shut its doors more than a year ago, none of us could possibly have foreseen what lay ahead. I did know, though, that come what may, we needed to do whatever we could to keep sacred music happening. I really felt that at this time of physical distancing, perhaps more than ever, we were all going to need to sing our hymns and hear our choir's anthems each week. So that's been our goal. To accomplish this, we first turned to our impressive archive of the choir's live recordings from the past 9 years. This archive provided music for all video worship services from the beginning of lockdown until the beginning of September. We also created 2 special YouTube concert events from these materials, our Lent concert last spring and our Christmas concert in December. At our homecoming service in September, we tried out some new technology to put together our first ever virtual choir videos. The response was so positive that we've been making them ever since. Although they look a bit like simple Zoom meetings, these virtual choir videos are anything but simple to make. It's a complicated process that's nothing like singing together in person, and it's required all of us to adapt quickly and to learn new skills. I'm so grateful to Patrick and every member of our amazing choir for their commitment and dedication to this enormous undertaking. Week after week, our singers overcome countless sirens and noisy neighbors to record perfect individual tracks that combine to create the beautiful music we all love. By the time this season is over, we'll have produced nearly 40 anthems and 85 hymns, which have all been enjoyed not only by our own congregation, but by congregations around the world whose churches have relied on our virtual hymnal throughout the pandemic. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Patrick and all of our amazing singers for everything they've done to keep this vital ministry going, even as we were forced to face some of life's greatest challenges. Although I'm deeply grateful to have been on this difficult journey in such fine company, I confess that I look forward to retiring the FAPC virtual choir at the end of May and to taking up our rightful place in the sanctuary choir loft this fall. I can't wait to see all of you there.
We had so many great things happen in family ministries in 2020. Our children's programming moved entirely to Zoom, with a weekly toddler time for our toddlers and preschoolers, led by our nursery coordinator, Osana Urbe, our children's music director, Dr. Eugenia Yao, and our preschool Sunday school teachers. Sunday school met weekly on Zoom as well, with large group music led by Dr. Eugenia Yao and a video introduction, followed by age-specific breakout rooms with Sunday school teachers who led fun games and activities around each book of the Old Testament. We've averaged 25 kids in our Zoom programs each week. Our 2020 Fifth Avenue Kids Camp met virtually in August using Cokesbury's Knights of the North Castle curriculum. 24 kids and 6 adult leaders spent the week discovering how to armor up with truth, justice, peace, and salvation through music, crafts, science, and Bible stories. While we were unable to host our usual family ministries events, we were able to have a virtual Easter party, virtual fall festival, and virtual Advent festival, complete with fun crafts, games, music, and a story. We've also had some exciting new things happening in adult education in 2020. In the early days of quarantine, we worked with the Office of Engagement to move our Lenten spiritual practices to an online format. Our leaders bravely recorded webinars on chanting, meditation, and writing to God, which were well received by a group of 25 people who met weekly through Lent and still live on our YouTube page. In the spring, we moved Credo to a recorded series that is available on our YouTube page. We also began a new podcast, Crossroads, that features theologians from all around the country spending time talking with me about faith and life. We kicked off with the importance of hearing the stories of people in our own congregation, particularly in regards to race. In the fall, we looked at fear through the lens of faith in a series of 4 podcasts. We also began offering monthly webinars, looking at topics such as the church and race and the Book of Lamentations. Webinar attendance has averaged around 65 people. Thank you for all of the support and curiosity you've brought to this year's adult education and family ministries.
As you can imagine, working with our young adults and youth usually relies on in-person gatherings, and pivoting to all virtual programs was challenging and yet necessary. Both groups have high Zoom fatigue as they are constantly on screens for school and work. And yet with such high demands from the screen, they take the time to gather because they prioritize their church families, spiritual growth, and a call to follow Jesus. For our youth, we were still able to gather virtually for fun game nights, online baking nights, and even building a spring terrarium that many of our youth are reporting are still alive. This past winter and spring, we did a deep study into the fruits of the Spirit and how they intersect with justice. In addition, we have begun Project You and Me, a program that matches up adults in our congregation with some of our teenagers as they navigate through the pressures of life together. Our first event involved cooking together in Zoom breakout rooms. One of my highlights was surprising our graduating seniors with donuts and baked treats since we could not celebrate at church like we usually would. Our young adults program was as vibrant as our youth. We gathered weekly for community groups and sporadically for special events like online virtual concerts, trivia nights, a Christmas party, and a virtual fall retreat. Our participants received a pumpkin carving kit for our fall retreat, and we had ourselves a good old-fashioned pumpkin carving contest. As the pandemic infiltrated most aspects of their lives, our young adults reminded each other that they were not alone and found hope in the good news of Jesus. Many tears of lament and many silent hand claps of joy were shared on our Zoom screens. Another major thing that happened this year was the creation of our anti-racism response team this past summer. The team developed a deep and meaningful curriculum and videos that help bring awareness to the systemic issues happening in our country. They did that by sharing our congregates' stories and asking our members to reflect on their own story. The goal was that these stories would move people towards empathy as we will continue to think through how we better engage in racial justice so that we all see and treat each other as beloved children of God. It's been a productive and meaningful year for these ministries, and we are grateful for all the ways that you have engaged and supported this work.
Over the course of 2020, community groups in many ways became the lifeblood of live church engagement.
We have 20 of these groups now meeting virtually, with topics ranging from Bible study to book groups to topical discussion and even just old-fashioned fellowship. We are grateful to new leaders who have started 6 groups during this season, with one in particular which offers support to anyone who has lost their employment due to COVID-19. For membership, Fifth Avenue has been blessed to continue welcoming and celebrating classes of new members. With groups this past fall and winter, we've seen an exciting shift with these individuals. Among our 24 new members, just about half do not reside in New York City. Throughout our community and in our membership classes, we are connecting and expanding our reach further than ever to lean into the church's vision to be the light, leaven, and salt in New York City and beyond.
This is a congregation whose members look out for each other, hold each other in prayer, and support each other through life's challenging times. While during COVID-19, we haven't been able to make in-person home, hospital visits, or flower delivery, our caregiving has been as active as ever. In the past year, we've had 4 congregation-wide call-a-thons to check in with all our members, make sure people are connected to worship and programming, and identify any pastoral concerns. Our deacons have maintained a robust card, calling, and prayer ministry, sent Christmas poinsettias and Easter lilies to our frail and homebound members, and even managed to pull off a virtual Christmas angel tree drive. This spring, some volunteers helped members make vaccine appointments, while other vaccinated members escorted them to those appointments. We've continued to send out quarterly devotionals, and we're so grateful to our parish associate, the Reverend Patty Kitchen, who has been staying in close contact with some of our beloved long-term members. Meanwhile, our circle conversations moved to Zoom to discuss topics like managing isolation, recognizing depression, and communicating with empathy in a polarized world. A record number of women gathered on Zoom for our annual Women's Winter Sabbath retreat, and our bereavement groups have been helping members cope with the loss of loved ones. Our members are the true ministers of the church, and on behalf of the pastoral staff, I want to thank you for being a congregation of people who care, call, reach out, volunteer, love, nurture, and pray for each other.
"2020 presented opportunities for outreach ministries to respond to the pressing realities of others caused by COVID-19, housing, food, and economic insecurities, as well as other social issues. Fifth Avenue's grounding motivation in outreach ministries is to continue to amplify the light, leaven, and salt of Christ in service to our local, regional, and international communities. In all of our work, we carry the historical legacy of Fifth Avenue's activism and community-based response to care for the vulnerable today in our 6 outreach ministry programs. These include Meals on Heels, the Ecumenical Outreach Partnership, A Place at the Table, the David B. Skinner Shelter, Homelessness, and Mission Partners. We have many successes to be proud of. In 2020, the Ecumenical Outreach Partnership responded to over 1,200 food referrals for our hungry and homeless neighbors. Meals on Heels doubled its weekly meal output to the elderly and homebound because of COVID-19 and a downshift in economic and financial comforts, as well as the rising cost of food. From May to October, A Place at the Table provided 120 to 160 meals a week, providing both nourishment and comfort to the hungry. And yes, the David B. Skinner Shelter temporarily closed due to health and safety restrictions. Yet that did not deter us. We successfully housed 35 homeless individuals in emergency and long-term housing through our Ecumenical Outreach Partnership and our extensive agency network. Finally, our mission partners committed over $140,000 in financial assistance. This aid supported ministries focusing on community experiences of incarceration, domestic abuse, LGBTQ+ support and advocacy, immigration, migration, refugees and orphans, supportive housing for the elderly and homeless, church and economic development, ecology, and education. All of our work is made possible because of the investment made by you, our members, and the lay and clergy leadership of Fifth Avenue. On behalf of all those we care for, thank you for your support to serve the vulnerable. As a community of faith, we truly demonstrate that love is shown in deeds, not only in words.
The year 2020 belies description with any one or two adjectives. Maybe that's why we keep calling it unprecedented. Unprecedented is our way of saying that we packed an entire decade's worth of "I'd rather not do that again" experiences into 2020. 2020 began with whispers of a frightening virus spreading abroad. By last spring, we were plunged into a global pandemic. As the news grew more dire, our stress grew. We were tossed into an isolating, toilet paper hoarding, buy an overpriced N95 mask, check on a friend season of distancing, sadness, and fear. A season that was also blessedly interrupted by fortifying vistas of bravery, duty, and generosity. This was true in the wider world, and it was true here at Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church. In response to the pandemic, we closed this building, drastically cut our expenses, and made a gargantuan pivot to put our worship and educational experiences online. At the same time, responding to human need in our city, we resolved to continue our mission-critical Meals on Heels ministry. And we began an entirely new midday meal program, A Place at the Table. Then, in response to the killing of George Floyd and resulting Black Lives Matter protests, our congregation joined a critically important national conversation about race. We approached this work in an innovative and gracious manner. It was a lot. And in the face of it all, FAPC showed its mettle. Throughout 2020, this congregation focused on the right things. In extraordinary circumstances, we fixed our minds and hearts on being Christ's faithful church. As I've said many times, we are a diverse crew. We don't all look alike, we don't all think alike, and that covers all manner of topics, including pandemics. Still, Fifth Avenue Presbyterian Church rose to the occasion. We worked through or set aside differences of opinion and strategy to do the jobs that needed to be prioritized in the midst of this crisis. We reached out to each other in care. We served those most in need in our city. We talked about hard topics with insight and honesty. We maintained divine worship in evolving and creative ways. I look back on the incredible effort that went into making church happen this past year in awe. I'm so grateful to all of you who, in so many different ways, put a shoulder to the wheel and helped this city and this community walk faithfully through and begin to climb out of the grim valley presented by the pandemic. Thank you. Thank you. I want to close this annual report by sharing 3 brief memories from 2020 with you. I have so many vivid memories of this past year, and I bet you do too. Somehow 2020 has imprinted itself on us in deep ways. From among the dozens of poignant images that are in my head, I've chosen 3 to share with you today. Memory number 1. In the early days of the pandemic, before we got more professional in our filming, and during the time of the most strict travel restrictions in this city, it was often the case that the only 2 people in this sanctuary filming Sunday sermons were my life's partner, Amy, and me. Traveling into the church, we found the streets in Midtown to be strangely quiet, empty. Inside the church, things were quieter still. Once we had everything set up and ready to film, Amy would start the camera and sit down. She was your stand-in. In this vast, quiet sanctuary, I looked at her face and I imagined that all of you were present with her. I will always remember the strange trips Amy and I made to this church during the early days of the pandemic and how we brought you into this sacred space with us. Memory number 2, Zoom meetings. These technological connections were critical, exhausting, and life-giving all at the same time. I'll never forget how my heart swelled when we connected for our first congregational Zoom gathering, and seeing all your faces waving and trying to figure out how to mute or unmute your computers, smiling at each other, shouting out greetings. It was a disorderly, joyful glimpse into the communion of saints. Memory number 3, the Christmas dinner served right outside of the sanctuary on 55th Street to homeless friends and to any New Yorkers in need of sustenance. John Sheehan and Reverend Kate Dunn playing host, handing out turkey dinners and ginger cookies in the cold, looking at the line stretching around the block. Those are my 3 memories. I bet you have a set of precious memories from 2020 as well, and we would like to hear about them. Would you be willing to share 2 or 3 memories of your life and this church during the pandemic with us? We plan to bundle them together in some form and to make them available in the church archives. I think this exercise could be a good spiritual practice, and I imagine that future generations of Christians in this place might be grateful to hear how we lived out our faith in 2020. If you're willing to share, please email communications@fapc.org. Bless you, my friends. Bless you, and thank you for your faithfulness.